everybody, Angela here, and welcome back to another Hobby Night episode. This week we are going to be taking a look at the Games Workshop news off of the Warhammer Community site, including those new flying keyword rules, as well as the morale and strategic reserves changes. And there's so much more, so we'll get to that in a moment. But first, I wanted to remind you guys to subscribe because I have a particularly cool painting video coming out on Monday rather, and I hope you guys check it out. It is also very cool because we are hosting a painting contest in conjunction with Games of Berkeley, and we're gonna have all of the details for that in Monday's painting video. So like I said, make sure to check that out. Hope you guys enjoy it. But for now, let's go ahead and meet up with John, and we're gonna talk about the Games Workshop news.
Games Workshop's trickle of information about terrain continued this week. This week they gave us the rules around the keyword dense cover. I believe we may have seen this in previous weeks, and if not, it's pretty obvious that this is going to apply to terrain features such as forests. And the basic idea behind it is if you are standing in something with this keyword or behind something with this keyword and you get shot at, you inflict a -1 to hit penalty on whoever is shooting at you. This does not seem to impact you if the attacker is standing, say, in the same forest as you, which I suppose makes a level of sense. And also, if you're firing out of a piece of terrain, it does not convey any negative penalty to you, because, it's the idea of you're butted up against the tree and, peeking out around the corner, right? So, hopefully this means we will see a bit more usage of forests and their ilk, little less of just straight up ruins. Let us know down in the comments what you think you'll be using. Next up, during the Drukhari faction focus, Games Workshop gave us a little more clarity on how they are fixing the behavior of aircraft and normal units. I almost said infantry, but this also affects things like tanks and monsters. And the summary of it is, this is basically rules lawyer here on screen for aircraft and ground units don't interact. They can't overlap each other, they can't have their bases on top of each other, but when it comes to things like shooting within engagement distance of each other, moving away from one another, line of sight, things like that, they basically ignore each other. The idea being there's an infantryman on the ground, there's a plane, hundreds, theoretically actually thousands of feet up in the air. So none of those things affected. Now, auras and all that, I think that still gets effective. And that's just a game balance issue at the end of the day. Or you can just imagine every aura is just a giant beam of light that shoots off into the sky, but only goes 6 inches away from the guy. So it's just a very tall pillar. That's probably what's actually happening. Of course, it's the Emperor's Light. Some of the panic within the Tau Empire was abated this week when it was revealed that the Tau will continue to get to fire Overwatch as they have through all of 8th edition going into 9th. We learned last week that most armies are going to lose the ability to fire Overwatch with the exception of using a stratagem, or potentially very specific datasheet rules or codex stratagems, but for the most part there's going to be way less Overwatch in the next edition. Tau looking at a lot of things potentially hurting them in the next edition. More dense terrain rules, the inability to fall back and shoot with fly. We learned that might have been this week or last week, but if it was this week, that's news for this as well. And all in all, it's at least good to know that they at least have some defensive capabilities now. With for the greater good and all that does make sense, because otherwise that rule was, one, going to sort of become useless, and two, at least some amount of point value in the Tau army would be lost if this rule didn't go into place. So I appreciate it still being there, as somebody who is interested in one day making an anime fish boy army. In the Astra Militarum faction overview, there was a big reveal about how morale and what is now called combat attrition will work. Now, leadership is going to behave pretty much as it has in 8th edition from the perspective of you take the number of models that you lost this turn, you roll a d6, you add that number of models to the d6 roll. If it exceeds your top leadership value, then you have failed the test. Now, the difference is that unlike in this edition, you do not lose a number of models equal to the difference of the test. So the all or nothing, as it's been commonly called, issue with leadership is kind of gone. The issue being, say you were running, like for me, I played Necrons. If I had a 20-man Necron unit, if the opponent blew away 10 of them in one turn, because Necrons are not fearless for some reason, then I was going to end up losing another D6 guys, potentially more, if I end up taking more penalties in my leadership from either more damage or auras or yada yada yada, and it ends up resulting in these huge groups of units leaving. Now, there is a cinematic quality to that, if within a matter of seconds, 50% of your compatriots in arms just drop to the ground. I can see how, everyone would break, but from a gameplay perspective, it's a little swingy. So instead, once you have failed that test, so everything you've done up until this point is just like 8th edition, you will then treat the unit, in essence, like they were in a transport that gets destroyed. So you take a handful of dice, 1 die for each model in the unit, you roll them, and for every one you roll, a model leaves. So it means if you fail the test, then every model in the unit has a 1 in 6 chance of failing. And there are some modifiers to this. For example, we already know from this preview here that if the unit is below half strength, you take an additional -1 to the combat attrition test, meaning that instead of having a 1/6 chance of fleeing, it becomes basically a third, which is much, much worse. Well, it's double. So it's going to be interesting because there's a lot of mitigation in the game right now to pretty much avoid leadership anyway. There's obviously been the stratagem, but I mean, as a Necron player, I tend to take the Warlord trait that allows me to ignore leadership tests. There's a lot of army building. Like, you basically don't build Primaris armies with more than 5 guys in the squad, and if you really are going to like 10, you're still very, 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 very rarely actually going to take a test. So I haven't seen anything that makes me think we're going to be taking more leadership tests, but at least when we do, they seem like they're going to be more interesting. Stopping over with the super heavyweights, we got a little bit of a preview on how knights are going to be run, and super heavies, but for the most part, this is going to affect knight players, and maybe an Imperial Guardsman wants to run like a Shadow Blade or a Bane Blade or something like that. Now, it is fairly similar to what we've seen already with the other detachments. However, there is nothing in the command benefits about the CP costs for these detachments being refunded. That means if you're looking to run some knights in your army, even if you're trying to run like a mono knight army, as far as we know now, you're paying those CP. That being said, on screen, let's see, I believe this is... Yes, it's Jason, one of their playtesters. Jason made a point. It's possible to get the CP refunded for this super heavy detachment. We don't know how yet, and they actually say in the article that it will be addressed sometime in the future. Very vague Games Workshop rules, but hey, so there will be a means of getting, still basically having like 12 CP as a knight player at a 2,000 point battle. We just don't know what it is. And since it doesn't just seem to be putting your warlord into the detachment, I'm not sure what they're thinking about doing. If you have any ideas, or if you've caught something in the rumor mill that I haven't, let us know down in the comments, please. And finally, some light was shown on combat patrols and a little bit on crusade. Now, this mission that we're looking at right here, Incisive Attack, this might have been the mission that was previewed at the big reveal a couple of weeks ago. Very interesting mission. Honestly, Angela and I are thinking about using one of these for our first battle report for the channel, because honestly, the space will work on the counter we have available while in quarantine, and since we are thinking about playing Crusade for the channel, hey, this seems like where we might start anyway, right? Now, the mission itself, we've known all this. We've already known what we're being told here about the patrol detachment. It's pretty much what we thought it would be based on the other ones. It has a small HQ and troop requirement, and you can get your warlord, if your warlord's in it, you get those command points rewarded. And so what that means is if you are playing a patrol game or a starting crusade game at 25 power, you're going to be playing with 3 command points, because I think that's what they showed in the preview before. 500 points or 25 power equals 3 command points. Relatively easy to get some farming with a relic or something, but the good thing to keep in mind is that They have made it clear in many articles that you will be generating a command point every turn. So if you assume that your average battle is going to go 3 or 4 rounds, you're actually looking at 6 or 7 command points at a 500 point scale. So I think there's going to be a lot of tricks that might actually result in those games not going as long, because you'll be able to pull out like that, the massive combo of mortal wound grenades or something. You can tell I play her Death Guard. Things like that. Now, there was one other thing, and I believe Auspex Tactics already talked about this a few days ago, but Games Workshop released a couple of sample armies talking about the 25 power level cap for the upcoming crusade, or these smaller missions. And some of these, now, the Necrons here, we got units we don't know what they are yet. So, kind of hard to tell, but if I had to guess, we know that the Necron Warrior is supposed to be 12 points a mini. That means a squad of 10 would be 120 points. I'm guessing they're going to be 6 power. If they're 6 power, that means there's 13 remaining for the Lord and the Destroyers. I think Games Workshop likes to keep their characters a little bit on the cheaper side, so I expect this Lord to be 6 power, the 3 Destroyers to be 7. That or vice versa. That's where I stand on that. We can guess where we are with the Indomitus Space Marines. The Primaris Lieutenant is like a 4 power, I believe. And then from there, we can sort of guess that the Veterans are probably a little bit higher. So are the Outriders. Like the Assault Intercessors are probably 5. And then these Veterans or the Bikes probably are 6 points. Maybe they're 12, 17, I don't know, something like that. Outriders I'm expecting to be 5 points because they're probably going to be underpriced, and I'm going to weep as a Necron player. I guess if I ever play the Hobby Knights, they'll be good for that. I should look on the bright side of things. Now, on the more interesting side of things, we have the Gene Stealer cult example, as well as the Chaos Space Marine example. Now, I don't know Gene Stealer cults very well at all, but what I understand is that this is not the correct power as we understand them right now. And this is supposed to be actually 27 or 28 power. And so maybe this is Games Workshop dropping a hint that we're about to see the power levels of some of these units change. They have said they are revisiting some. They haven't been clear at all about how widespread it's going to be. So maybe we're going to see something big, because similarly, over here, this Chaos Space Marine list should be higher. Now, I think the point was made that it's possible maybe whoever made it only counted one Obliterator, because I think Obliterators are 5 points each. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this is also too few points, and it has me optimistic. However, being off by like 5 points does seem extreme. I'm hoping we see some troop points go down for Chaos. Offhand, I know that Angela's Death Guard, the Plague Marines, are 7 power for a squad of 5 versus 5 power for 5 Intercessors. And I know the Death Guard are tougher, but they're single wound. I don't know. I feel like they should be down to 6. 5 might be pushing it, but I feel like they should be 6. But all in all, the trickle of information on 9th edition continues into the future. Hopefully next week we will have even more for you folks.